Welcome back to Battered Bruised, Not Broken. Listen, if you've been tuning in over the past couple of weeks, then you know it keeps getting better. I mean, every single time it just keeps getting better. I cannot wait to introduce to you today our speaker for tonight. She is a powerhouse. She has such a powerful story to share. Listen, I hope you guys are ready. I know you're already anticipating her. And so you're sitting on the edge of your chairs and you're wondering what is her story and who is her. So without further ado, I want to go right ahead and welcome her to the stage tonight so that you can meet her as well. Welcome, Andrea. How are you?
Oh my God, I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here. And I
Yes,
love your accent.
thank
Like, I
you.
could just sit here and listen to you. And can I just tell you, thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Definitely, you're welcome. You are most welcome. And so, Andrea, I know they're watching and they're like, okay, we want to learn about her story. But before we get there, I want you to go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Absolutely. And I just want to make this one comment because as I was backstage and I was listening to your songs and the music, it made me think we don't often feel like we're a warrior. So
That's
I do
true.
want to address that tonight on the podcast. So a little
Yeah.
bit about me. Let me see. Well, there's a little bit, but there's a lot to say. So I shared with you earlier that I'm going to be 62 on the 21st of this month. And yeah, like, I don't know. Somehow I don't know. I just thought I'd stay like 30 or 40 forever, but then that can't be because I have a son who's 31 and a daughter who's going to be 27 at the end of this month. So it's not, it's not, but it's like you just blink your eye and then the next thing you know, you're going to be applying for Social Security. It's like, what? But so, I don't think my story maybe is so far different than most people's stories, but I had a great childhood. I had great parents. I was raised in a home that was an open door. My mom was never well, and she was always sick with certain things. And when I was born, she was blind. She got her sight, started to get her sight back through surgery when I was 9. But she had had many, many, many things, and I was just always used to my mother being sick. But then when I was 18, my father got sick, and I was always a daddy's girl. And he was sick for 4 years, and that journey alone was that, yeah, it was young. Just, I think I was just wanting to ignore it, right? And it was the time of life. It was the 80s, and, and I was young, as I said, and it was all about having fun and just, but then I would come home after being out, and my dad had to be, say, rushed to the hospital because they needed to revive him. His heart had stopped. So there was some real seriousness. The last year of his life, he didn't really come out of a hospital. And I was finding at that point, and I didn't know this stuff, right? Because I think life is to connect the dots to your past where you can then figure stuff out. But I couldn't bring myself to go to the hospitals anymore and to visit. And I would go, but then I'd want out of there. I was starting to suffer from anxiety and panic attacks, but nobody in the 80s was even talking about that. And, when you're young, and I was like 22 at this point, your friends don't want to talk about it because I think some people think it's like a disease, like they could catch it, right? So my father had passed away. And it's funny because people would say to me leading up to his passing that, oh, well, I guess, you've had all this time to prepare. So it's like they sold me something and I purchased it. But let me just tell you something. No, because I had never, that was my very first true experience. Yes, I lost a grandfather when I was little, but that was my grandfather. Not like I wasn't close with him, but I was like 4 or 5 at the time, so it didn't really have an effect. But it wasn't true because I didn't understand finality. And then there's something that happens, and something happened to me that I wasn't understanding. So in any case, my father passed in June, and in September, I then met who would become my husband. And it was a really fast 2 weeks of, we don't need to share with your viewers, but of what 22-year-olds do who, are, not good girls. I will just say I was not a, 2 weeks later, we moved in together.
Okay.
And then 3 years later, we got
married.
Yeah, so it was very fast. But what was happening to me, and of course, I thought it was George, not realizing that through my experience, I really became a little bit cray-cray, right? Like, well, yeah. I mean, I looked okay, on the outside. On the outside, you look like you got your stuff together, right? But on the
Yeah, yeah.
I did not have my stuff together. I
Oh,
was
wow.
suffering from terrible abandonment issues that I didn't
Mm.
understand.
Okay.
I had anger that I didn't understand. What I did know was I'm not the same person that I always knew myself to be. But outside of that, and I was seeking out help within the medical community, like psychiatrists and psychologists and psychotherapists and social workers, and they always ask you for your backstory, but they really truly didn't give me any help. Anyways, I was really struggling with this for quite a while. And it was maybe about a year or two after our wedding, my friend referred me to her psychiatrist. It was the 80s. Everybody was going to see their shrink. That was like the thing to do. And if you didn't have a psychiatrist, like, I guess you just didn't make it on the list. So she refers me to this new psychiatrist who, again, I give backstory to. And I think it was literally my first session with her. She writes me a prescription for Prozac. Now, Prozac had just come out on the market. I don't think they had done a lot of testing. And back then, my mindset was that the doctor gives you a prescription, you take it. I'm not that same person today. And I haven't been her for a long time, but I was her then. And what was happening was my suicidal ideologies were intensifying as I was on Prozac, to the point where I tried to take my life. But even then, may I just tell you, Kamisha, that even in the emergency room at a hospital, and you're giving them backstory, they still don't connect the dots to you have unprocessed grief, you suffered post-traumatic stress. Post-traumatic stress comes with anger, comes with anxiety, and comes with panic attacks. But nobody's flipping telling me this. So I keep thinking that there's, now, when I say this, when I say I kept thinking there was something wrong with me, I don't mean in the term that, yes, there really was something wrong with me. It was like, there's something wrong with me. The baseball bat, when we do that? Yeah, I'm not good enough. Boom. I must be crazy. Boom. Look at me. I was in my last year when my father passed. You said you had come to Toronto to study, so you may know this school. And it's downtown, and it's called, they've changed the name slightly, the Ontario College of Art. And then it was like one of the most renowned art colleges literally throughout the world. I couldn't finish school. So all of these changes, I do come to know now that it's part of grief. Okay. So George and I are married, and we're growing up together because we moved in together at 22. You think you're pretty mature, but now that I'm going to be 62, no, I was so far from mature. We're married. We're, building this life together. A number of years later, we have our children. So, I hope at that point I'm mature. But the depression that I was in for a number of years, I never went back. After I tried to take my life with the Prozac, I never, ever renewed another prescription for that. I knew that somehow, like intuitively, I knew that I need to do something. I need to do something different. What is that different? I got back to exercising, and I like a fiend. I would go to the gym and I would work out, and that really helped me. And then I got pregnant with our son. and life was going great. And then I got pregnant, and 4.5 years later with our daughter. That was a bad pregnancy, bad, all the way around. I was in a wicked car accident when I was 6 months pregnant with her. Now that I shouldn't have, I don't even know how God, but by the grace of God, I survived, and I didn't lose the baby. So again, more post-traumatic stress. Again, more trauma to the body. Again, not really getting the help that I need, but that's okay. Because a few years after that, I was part of a health and wellness company that originated from Japan. So they did things on Eastern philosophy and it was the first time I really heard about the pillars. And so their philosophy was, you had to have like the 5 pillars, picture it like your car. If one of your tires are low on air, can the car run properly? No. So if your pillars, what is it? It's like in the center, it's your spirituality. Then it's your family and your finances, your physical health, your mental health, right? And so really to encompass a whole healthy person. This company offered a very intensive weekend workshop for their distributors because they wanted to have everybody really be at their best. So I did this, and I did it about 4 times throughout my time with this company. But the first time I did this weekend intensive, the second night, or it could have been the first night, the facilitator, the trainer, led us through a specific meditation. So I think I was probably around 37 at this point. And was in this meditation that it was like, oh my goodness, my whole 20s started to make sense to me through this meditation. Now I'm realizing I never processed the grief of my father at all. I just looked like maybe I did. I didn't process the hurt. I didn't process the loss. I didn't process the abandonment. And it also got me in touch with, I was angry. I was angry that he was dying. I was such a daddy's girl. And now, what do you mean? I was always used to my mother being sick, but I'm not used to you being sick. And I mean, I can't blame my mother, and I don't blame her, rest her soul. I really don't. I'm sure she was in her own trauma and not really wanting to talk about things. And nobody wants it. People just don't want to talk about it. So in any case, that really helped me put things into perspective. So now we're going to jump forward a few years. And we have a long weekend here in Canada in May. It's our first long weekend of the summer, Victoria Day weekend. And it's a little bit hectic, a little bit kind of a lot of chaos going on within my family, with my mom, with my siblings. Whatever. I had already been through, just prior to that weekend with my husband and his family, we had lost his father and we had lost both of his grandmothers in a 7-month period. In any case, well, literally 2 weeks before this date, we had just buried his other grandmother. 2 weeks later, the Tuesday morning after this long weekend, I wake up to get the kids up for school and my husband up for work and to take them to the office. But he didn't wake up. He had passed away in his sleep.
Oh, wow.
Now, he had just turned 41. I had just turned 40. Our son had just turned 10 because my husband and my son is born a day after my husband's birthday. Right? And our daughter was 5.5. And yeah. Well, I thought my world had been rocked prior, but now it felt like I was standing on a rug and somebody yanked it out from underneath my feet, and I was like free falling. I honestly, I remember that morning needing to say to my children, because of course I had to phone 911, and they're trying to revive my husband and they're trying to bring him back. And I'm trying to distract the kids, but I have to tell them that their fathers, they're, even now, 21 years later, to remember back to that moment of sitting down with them in their room and to say to them that daddy's passed away. Now, the one thing that in a sad way, but in a helpful way, was I had told you that they had already lost their grandfather and their great grandmothers in that
Yes.
7. So they
Mhm.
at least had a bit of an understanding about death. Not really. I mean, really, you don't, right? But when I said those words, they kind of understood. That that was bad. And I knew that I needed to do things differently this time. I knew that I couldn't have the same experience that I did with the loss of my father. I'm a mother. I can't go wanting to take my life. I've got 2 small kids, right? But I also knew that I needed to do things differently because I'm going to have to lead my children down a path so that hopefully, you don't ever know, there is no guarantee, they wouldn't experience a lot of the deep grief, the sadness, the depression from grief. So it was maybe a month or so after my husband's passing. I put the kids in day camp and I had come home. I was a cigarette smoker at the time. And I came home and I went out on the deck and I was smoking like a chimney. Like, yeah, I'd light one and put it out, light another one. But in my head, I'm having like these thoughts because it was really bad. Like in the morning, I wasn't sleeping. In the morning when I was getting them ready for school, and now it's summertime camp, I'd put the stereo on in the dining room where they would sit and have their breakfast. I would be in the kitchen packing their lunches, getting their breakfast together. But it was like Niagara Falls. I couldn't not cry. And to be honest, I didn't stop myself from crying, but it wasn't good. And especially when I would drop them off at school or I drop them off at camp, then I would come home and then I could really fully break down, right? But this one specific morning, as I'm on the balcony, as I said, smoking like a chimney, I'm having these thoughts because myself and my children, we just want to be a family again. Like, we just want our family put back together. We don't understand why our family's so fractured. But the thoughts of how can I, Andrea, their mother, make it that in one clean sweep, we would be dead and we would be in heaven as a family. Kamisha, I cannot begin to tell you how I scared the shit, excuse me for swearing, out of myself. Now,
Wow.
scared the daylights out of myself. So I could have walked to the hospital where both kids were born because it was like a 4-minute walk. But God, who's always spoken to me, said, go into your room and find the card that the funeral home gave me, a pamphlet, with the receipt, the la la la, because there's a card in there for the grief counselor. Go and get the card. That's what I hear in my head. Well, I don't know where I've put it. I run into my room like a mad woman and I'm ripping the drawers apart and I have to find the card. And I phoned the funeral home again, but by the grace of God, Isabel was the woman's name, was there. And we were talking on the phone for a very long time, as a matter of fact. And I was explaining to her what I was experiencing. Kamisha, have you ever received a gift that you realize, wow, this is one of the most important, powerful gifts that I probably will ever receive in my life? Well, that morning on the phone call, she says to me, Andrea, I want you to know something. I want you to know that all of this that you are thinking and these thoughts, that's normal. That's part of grief. Keisha, I don't think I had, my husband passed on May 20th. That were some at some point now in July at this point. I don't think was breathing. I think I had been holding my breath the whole time.
Oh, wow.
I really felt like I was able to exhale. Like, thank you. I said, had I had that information when my father passed, it would have put things into perspective, right? I would have understood why I couldn't finish school. I would have understood why I felt abandoned, because abandonment is very much part of grief. I would have understood that anger is part of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
I would have had this awareness, but I didn't. But now I did. She then connected me to a psychiatrist who only dealt with grief, but specifically with young spouses. Because I have to tell you, I'd be out with the kids and I felt like I had the word freak stamped on my forehead. Right? I would see families. We would be at the mall and I would see families and fathers. You know, it was always a thing, you know, whether it had been Ryan or whether it had been Natalie when they were little, and we would go to the Santa Claus parade, or we would go somewhere where you'd see he'd put them on his shoulders, right? It's something normally dads do. And if we were out and I saw that, like, I would I have to go home. I can't be here. I can't see this. I can't be around. This went on for quite a while. But I went to see the psychiatrist. Oh my God. It's like, I said the first thing to him, I said, I don't want to don't talk to me about antidepressants. Like, I don't want you bringing it up. Don't mention it to me, because there's no drug strong enough that's going to change my situation. Somehow, some way, I really going to have to learn how to process and manage this grief. So he was okay with that, which was very helpful. And I started to have the kids go for their individual sessions. He says to me, he goes, well, you know, Andrea, I could really see you becoming a grief counselor. I swear. It was like I bit off his head. I go, what? Don't say that to me. I'm not going to let this define the rest of my life, my future. Right? Because I had felt like that's what had happened to me with my father's passing. It had consumed so much in so many years. It's like, okay, he backs off. The kids and I are going to bereavement groups, and I'm seeing the psychiatrist. I took the first year off. I was on life insurance. We were tens of thousands of dollars in debt at this point. It was not a fun situation. I had to declare bankruptcy. It was not fun, but it was okay. And I couldn't have gotten a job, because if you would have asked me, Kamisha, hey, Andrea, what had you been doing the last, and you know how you'll have a gap on your resume? I can't answer. I'll break down in tears in the interview. So I had to take some time off. I also needed to take some time off. As I said, my son had just turned 10. He was really aware, and he's very sensitive, and he's very concerned. Like, he wouldn't have, so say he needed to leave school, as an example, he would have not wanted to have bothered me to come and pick him up, right? So I didn't want to put any more added onto him. So I did take that. Right. I mean, I took to take the first year off for a lot of things. I was not okay. I was okay, but I was not okay. I looked at, you know how, especially women, were very robotic. Right? So I looked like I was okay, because I was a good little robot who had a really good mask on her face. After the first year, I thought, well, now who do I want to be when I grow up? I had no clue. What do I want to do? I told you I went to art college. I had been doing sales. When I left high school, I wanted to be a social worker, but I thought, no, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Exit stage left and moved to art college. And then I sold a lot of different products, financial products. It's like, what? I don't know who I want to be. I don't know what I want to do. I discovered that the life coaching industry was just starting here in Canada. And again, I heard God say to me, I want you to become a life coach. So that was the path that I started to go down. And I started to get my certification. People were referring clients. It was no big, there was like nothing online. Okay. There was what, MySpace at the time. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no Skype. There was none of those things. To have international client, like you would have a website for sure, but you would use a conference phone line. And then I've seen the landscape of my industry evolve, as we all have, when we saw Facebook come to be, and then Instagram and Twitter and all of these different social networks. But I have to tell you something. When I freaked out on the psychiatrist about, yeah, don't mention about grief, and I'm not doing that. So what we resist persists. And who started to become my first chunk of clients were widows.
Wow.
But not that beginning phase of their grief. It was more like they're approaching the first year and they really feel stuck in their grief. And my job was to help them really show them how that they can move forward from that time. And that's basically been my journey. All of these years, the grief, and along with grief comes, it brings up these other things that we didn't want to pay attention to, like low self-worth or lack of confidence, right? All of these things. So.
Yeah. But who did you have as your support team? Because I know you had the grief counselor you were seeing, but who did you have
Well, you know what? It's funny. Yeah, I think, and I'm sure this is a relatable thing. We can have people. I have great friends. I was saying to you, I'm from Toronto. I've lived here my whole life. I'm blessed. I have still a big group of girlfriends from elementary school. So and then I've made friends along the way.
That's good.
It's great, but again, when they can think they're wonderful, they'll come over, they keep you company. They bring a bottle of wine, you sit around. But to be honest, who did I have to support me with this? I needed to seek outside of my own network, and I needed to pay for the help that I needed to get. And what I really discovered was it was life coaches, and that's where I started to hire life coaches. Of course, my friends were wonderful, and I think if I couldn't articulate a lot of things, and people, when you don't have something, you can't offer it if you don't possess it.
That's right.
Right. So the same way my friends, when I was 22, and their parents weren't passing away. I was born to older parents. Didn't want to really talk, because I'm telling you, it's like you have the cooties in a sense, right? Didn't want to talk about those things. And I don't even think I could have articulated it. And that's where we need to place ourselves, honestly. I don't say that because I'm a coach, but a coach or a doctor, we know to ask the right kind of questions that are going to be probing questions that are going to start to remove those layers and remove the layers. And so we could start to get to that root of what's really going on. Just like I had experience with Isabel that day, to get to that understanding of this is part of grief. And ever since then, that made me truly, I'm sure we've all heard the expression, sharing is caring, but truly sharing is caring, because God bless, today there's podcasts. There's Battered Bruised, but Not Broken to come on and for us to share our story. I've been blessed to come across a number of podcasts that are solely about grief, because now the dialogue is happening, conversations are happening, right? But then, to be honest, the grief counselor, the psychiatrist, my life coaches, and my friends were great when I didn't want to be all about my pain. And I want to, when George passed away, it's a little bit sad, but a number of my really close girlfriends were getting divorced at the time. So we were finding ourselves single again. It was like the girls are back in town, right? So, I would drop the kids off at my mother-in-law's, and I would go out. I would go dancing. I needed to loud music. I don't want to have to talk. I don't want to let me just dance. Let me just hear some music. I need a few drinks. Not that it's healthy, because let me tell you something, it's not. But that's what I did. That's what I did. And I paid for a lot of my help.
Wow.
And I encourage people. I do. I really encourage people. I've said it to friends. I say it to clients. I'll say it to a stranger. In order to get the help that's really going to benefit you, because it's not just about the story and repeating the story and just staying stuck in your narrative, because where does that get any of us? Nowhere. If you get the right help, if you pay for the right help, listen, yes, while my dad was dying after my father passed, I did seek in the traditional form, right? I wasn't getting the proper help. So even in the medical community, you may not always get that right doctor. But I think if you keep at it, if you keep on keeping on, you will get in the right chair in front of the right person that's going to facilitate your process of healing.
Mm-hmm. And so, quick question:
Yes.
were you able to find out, or did anything to find out what caused
He had a
the
heart
death
attack.
of your? Oh, it was a
He had a
heart.
heart attack in his sleep.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
And when you found that out, through dealing with all the grief, because you said just a few months prior to that, he had lost his parents, and then you having to lose other family too as well. You're kind of accustomed to losing someone. And did you at any point did you blame yourself for it? Did you blame yourself?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked. So I had just said earlier that 2 weeks before my husband's passing, we had buried his grandmother, the kid's other great grandmother. That evening, my husband and I went to see a friend of mine. And he was inside speaking with her, and I was outside. And I was having this very loud conversation with God. Like, I don't understand, God. I was starting a new career. I was doing what they tell you to do in order to achieve the success. I said I was in the world of personal development, new thought, new age. I was like, I don't understand. Do I stay in this marriage? Do I have to leave this marriage? We're on 18 years at this point. Like, what's going on? What's going on, God? Like, I need you to explain to me. And I forgot about that conversation. I did for a long time, though, think that somehow I should have known. I should have known that there was, you're sleeping in the same bed. I was like, how did I not know? How did I not know? Right? 3 years after my husband passed, my mom had passed. Life became that much tougher for me. The kids were getting older. My son went into a bad depression. The grief bit him. Maybe about a year and a half into his depression, my daughter was walking home, and was hit by a car. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, and when my mom passed, I went in for a full hysterectomy. I'd had to go in. My mom passed in July. In October, I was going in for it. So it was like, there was like no time to really take a breath, no time to breathe. And that's why that song about being a warrior, really, it was flooding me with like those deja vus. Because I would never have said to you that I was a warrior. Truly, Kamisha. I would tell you that I'm strong, because I've always had to be since I'm a kid. I would tell you that I'm adaptable, because I had to be as a kid, right? I was born to older parents. My mom was sick. I'd come home from school, and you'd find out your mother's in the hospital. So I was kind of used to uncertainty. I was used to, we can't really plan, because you could plan, but you don't know if it's going to take place. But a few years, many years, I think it was probably about maybe about 11 years after my husband passed, my life was crazy. I'd had a bit of a breakdown after with my daughter, and then we did a lawsuit, and remember when I said about always having to repeat a narrative, how it's not a healthy thing? I had to keep repeating the narrative of her accident to the medical, because she was a minor. So I had to be her advocate. So to any lawyer appointments and any medical appointments, I needed to keep telling the story. Yes, the police phone me. They're telling me my daughter's being taken to the kids' hospital, to the trauma unit, right? And and my son's in this depression, and I'm self-employed. I'm a coach, which the industry, for the most part, can be very feast or very famine. There's this chaos going on in my home. My daughter's suffering from terrible, terrible, terrible post-traumatic stress. And I think she also watching her brother, her older brother, struggling. And now I'm struggling. But of course, I wear a good mask. Of course, I look like everything's fine. But no, things were not fine. To the point that it was 2016 at this point. I just couldn't do it anymore. I truly wanted out of that apartment that morning when I woke up, and my husband didn't. I didn't want to live there anymore. But I'm full of fear. Where am I going to move to? That is going to cost me what it cost me here. I don't want to uproot my kids. They've already had enough. So I forced myself to stay. In 2016, I received an eviction notice on our apartment. It was the only home my kids had known. They came there from birth. I had already been living there for 24 years. I didn't do anything about it. We got evicted.
Wow.
Yeah. My kids got settled. I mean, they weren't little at this point, and they were both in college. Doesn't matter, though. It doesn't make it right. I mean, now there's just another upheaval for them. But I was meditating, and I came out of meditation, and it was, you've been self-sabotaging your income because you feel guilty because you thought you killed your husband. And that conversation that I was having with God 2 weeks prior to his passing came flooding back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a lot. And so, okay, so now you feel this way with the thoughts coming back to you, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's my fault. So when you were going through your grief counseling, did you address that then, or did you kind of hide that because you were ashamed to admit that that's how you felt?
No, I started to share it with the right people. I needed to, but I love that you brought up the S word, because shame and guilt. Like, I felt shame and guilt about being a little bitch to my father, especially last year, because I was so angry, right? So I felt this terrible shame. Like I was this terrible daughter because I couldn't sit at the hospital. I couldn't sit while he was in the ICU. I couldn't stay. I would get there and I'd want to run. I was like, right? Just let me run. You can run, but you can't hide, Kimisha. That's the thing. Our mind tricks us. It makes us think that, oh yeah, you can run, go out, go with your friends, do this, go to the mall, buy that. We do some retail therapy, right? Smoke a spliff, have a drink, smoke a cigarette. No. So the shame and the guilt was something. I think I felt more shame and guilt about the eviction at first than I had about other things.
Wow.
So it flooded those feelings of you are a loser.
Mm-hmm.
It intensified them.
Wow.
Beyond.
Wow. Wow. And so what were you able to win the case for your daughter? Did she get some type of release or relief, from the person who would have hit her in the accident?
Well, so it went on, and then she wasn't a minor anymore. And now she had to be her own advocate. But at this point, she was in college. I mean, the insurance, because we have no fault here. So it paid for a lot of things. It paid for physiotherapy, it paid for neuropsychologists, it paid for a lot of stuff. But then it was requiring her still at this point for a lot of appointments. Now, thank God. See, here's the thing. They wanted me to have this story that my daughter will not be able to have any true functioning life as she matures and ages. And in my spirit, that was just so the opposite of the mindset that I had. And it was the dichotomy of this. I kept feeling this pull and this push and this pull and this push of I need to present things, obviously, for her benefit. But I don't want to say, well, what she won't be able to hold down a job, or she won't be able to get married, or she won't be able to become a mother. She was hit when she was 15 years of age. And insurance companies, they're a little bit like the mafia, but at least the mafia tells you they're the mafia, the insurance. So they kept wanting to put things to pre-existing conditions for her. Well, she lost her father when she was 5.5. So they wanted to say her post-traumatic stress. And that may have been because that may have triggered that. Okay. We all have some pre-existing things along our way. So Natalie actually backed out of it in the end. And she was really happy that she did. To be honest with you, I didn't want to do a lawsuit because I knew I have lawyers in my family and, I have other stories about that, but I didn't want to. But the problem was, she was with 2 other friends that were also hit by this car, and their parents had gone to see lawyers. Well, you can't tell a 15-year-old girl, we're not going to do that, because that 15-year-old girl is not going to understand the why. She's going to think you don't care. Remember being 15? And,
Yeah.
15-year-old girls are very different. Well, at least with my children, 15-year-old girls and 15-year-old boys, stark contrast between the 2 of them. So I needed to do this for her because it was her that was injured, and she needed to know that I'm here and I'm here to support you. I want to just go back a bit. So when we started this lawsuit, the lawyer sent my daughter to a neuropsychologist for some testing. And they required all of her pediatrician's reports and all of her school, like all of that, right, to compile everything after. It was a bit over a year since the accident. It was mayhem in my house. I can't even begin to tell you the stuff that was going. It was like, honestly, I thought I was gonna, but I quit smoking in that time, so that was a good thing. Okay. But I have to tell you, if I could have said, hey, mom's gonna go get a pack of smokes and I'll be back, and never come home, that was kind of how I felt. I felt that I want to run again, but where the hell am I going? I have nowhere to run to. It was getting so bad between Natalie and her brother, between Natalie and myself. She wasn't getting up for school. I'd get these phone calls. A student in your household named was absent from, and I thought, if I get one of more of these, like, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm getting you up. You're not getting to school. You're like, I made a phone call to Jewish Family Child Services to speak to them about possibly putting her in foster care, because I was at my wit's end. I couldn't do this anymore. I just couldn't move forward. I was not really bringing in an income. I had all of the, and I'm the sole provider for my children, right? I have to pay rent. I have to pay car insurance. I have to pay groceries, and the kids are going, I'm telling you, it was like a day after I made this call and left a message because the person wasn't there. The neuropsychologist's office phones me back. They've completed everything. They received all her school records, all of her doctor's records. They did all from the testing. And now they're telling me things, Kamisha. You want to talk shame? You want to talk guilt? They're telling me what's wrong with my daughter. And I feel like such a bitch. This is my daughter who's suffering so terribly. And I, as her mother, but what it did was it made me think, oh my goodness, you're doing to Natalie what your mother did to you after you lost your father. Those mummy wounds, they're deep.
Wow.
And my mom was a fabulous mother.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, I'd like to say I was a good mom. Of course, I made many, many mistakes, as a lot of us mothers and parents do. But shame and guilt will lead you to very dark places that you don't recognize yourself anymore. And shame and guilt will create a massive amount of destruction. And shame and guilt are the enemy.
Wow. And so looking back on all that you have been through, based on what you shared with us here tonight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yes. And I had this revelation this past May on the 21st anniversary of my husband's passing. Holy Ghost got me. Oh my goodness. So I told you for 3.5 decades, I was a big studying and mastering and using in my practice as a coach with clients, new age and new thought tools, law of attraction. And I would, because I've always been a seeker. So I was seeking, and my intention was to find God, but I didn't. I opened the doors and the windows to the enemy. On May the 20th of this year, I hear the Holy Spirit say, Andrea, had you known God the way you know God now, the way you know Jesus now, truly you would have had a different go at this. So I really, now I have my Father's word. Now I know that there's promises. Now I know that there's things I can stand on. It wasn't a part of that world, right? New age and personal development is all about the self. Yourself, the I, right? So that shook me when I heard that, because nothing could have been further from the truth. Had I known God the way I know Christ today, yeah. So I encourage anybody who's going through anything to give your life to Christ, to get yourself right with God.
Yeah.
And the Holy Ghost. I hope I answered the question.
Oh yeah, definitely. You definitely answered. And we're coming close to the end. But just before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to speak to that woman who might be watching us right now, or maybe she'll catch the replay and she's dealing with grief. And it's been a lot that she's been through. She identifies so well with your story. I want you to leave her some encouraging, empowering words.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to tell her that she doesn't need to do it alone. She does not have to go it alone. Okay. That there are people out there who you can turn to, who will want to walk beside you. You should not be alone. You're going to feel alone, but you're not alone. So you need to reach out, and you need to be willing to receive. Now, listen, things aren't going to happen unless we are willing to accept that things are different. I needed to come to a place of making peace and accepting. So if you find yourself where your life just seems like one big jumbo mess, that's okay. You're going to figure it all out. You're going to get that help that you need. I left with Kamisha, actually, a link. I left her 2 links as 2 free gifts for your viewers, Kamisha. And one of them, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, is a 30-minute breakthrough session with me. It is completely no charge. It's not a sales call. It is free. In 30 minutes. You would be amazed at what we can uncover. We're going to unpack. We're going to remove those layers because there's a root. There's a root to our pain. And that's my Stamp It on Your Heart. And that is a prayer journal that I was anointed to create at the beginning of this year. Download it. It's free. It's creative. It's going to be a way that you are going to be able to get the word of the Father in your heart. That seed is going to crack and those roots are going to grow in your heart. I want you to reach out to me. You don't have to go this alone. You don't have to struggle with the shame and with the guilt, because what I have come to understand now that I walk with God, I did not know that there was this thing called the enemy. But now I know there's this thing called the enemy. And the enemy is going to want to lie to you. And is going to want to take, some familiar thoughts like he was doing with me about feeling like crap, about being upset with my husband, or our life not going in the direction that I thought it was supposed to go in the time frame that I thought it was supposed to move in, right? To, oh my God, I killed my husband. But no, I didn't kill my husband. And you haven't done the things that you thought that you did either. So I know Kamishi asked me for some encouraging words. The most encouragement and the truth is you're not alone. And if you feel you are, you need to ask yourself, is it true? Am I truly alone? Or am I wanting myself to believe that I'm alone? And it's okay if you are, in a sense. Like, by this point in my life, both of my parents have passed, my husband's passed, my in-laws have passed. My once used to be very big life of a lot of people has really shrunk to nothing. But that's okay, because now I have Christ in my life. So turn to God. Book a session with me. Or there might be another coach out there that you know. Or you may have a doctor, see your family doctor. Ask for a referral. But don't allow the lies of the enemy, of the shame and the guilt, and the feeling like you need to keep things a secret. Just don't buy into that, because you don't. And I really hope that helps your viewers.
Wow, well said, well said. And so, Andrea, I know that they're watching and they're connecting with your story here tonight. I want you to tell them where they can find you, those of them who may be watching them like, oh, I want to be able to follow her. Tell them where they can find
Would
you, where they
love
can
that.
find
Yes. Thank you, Kamisha. Okay, so you can find me on the usual suspects of social media. My Facebook, I'm under Andrea Julia Brunswick on Facebook. DM me, even though I think Facebook is changing its things, but DM me, send me a friend request. You could follow me on Facebook. On Instagram and LinkedIn, I'm under Andrea Brunswick. Reach out to me there. And my email address is andreajuliabrunswick@gmail.com. Shoot me an email. Book on my Calendly link. Book a 30-minute session. I'm telling you, there's always a specific route. And if we don't get to the root, now, it could take some time. Life is a process. Healing is a process. But we need to be willing to make peace with wherever we find ourselves. I really believe that is the key to anything. Okay, because we want to get out of things. As I had shared a number of times tonight, I wanted to run because I couldn't make peace with where I was finding my life and the upheaval. And that song, You Are a Warrior, beautiful song. Beautiful song, Kamisha. This is a fabulous show, Kamisha. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Honey.
Thank you. And so, Andrew, we just want to say thank you for being so open, so transparent, and vulnerable with us here tonight and sharing your story. I know that they have been blessed, especially those of them who are here with us and those who will tune in later. I'm sure they're going to be absolutely blessed. So, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Thank you,
you.
honey.
You
Thank
are
you.
welcome. You are absolutely welcome. Those of you who are now tuning in, we're just about to wrap up. We're getting ready to head out of here. But if you missed the beginning, that's okay. As soon as this live ends, you'll be able to rewatch this video. So just go right ahead, pull it up, and you're able to see what is happening. You just heard the story from Andrea Brunswick. She talked all about her loss that she would have endured and encountered and how she was able to overcome and how she was able to maneuver and navigate the new beginnings, the new waters of what she had experienced. And so, thank you so much for tuning in once again. This has been an amazing journey here with you at Battered Bruised, Not Broken on season 7. And next week, Wednesday, same time, same place, we're going to be right back here at 6:30 p.m., where you're going to hear from another powerful woman. And so, we just want to say thank you for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.